Could the Boston Bruins be interested in Jonathan Toews, the trade deadline acquisition? We'll discuss that possibility. Plus, it appears as though the Anaheim Ducks are heavily scouting the Oilers. There's some belief that maybe they could be having an eye on Puljujarvi. Plus, Bo Horvat, captain of the Canucks, has put out a statement. Lots of trade speculation, contract speculation. We'll discuss the latest update on him and take a look at his statement. Plus, we have some more injury updates as well and some more updates from the NHL's Board of Governors meetings, including a potential update on the NHL Salary Cap. We'll discuss all that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As you can see, we're once again in a new location, back to Walt Disney World Resort in Orlando, Florida, this time at a different location, actually at Animal Kingdom launch, so just outside here in the back patio. It's dark now, but earlier I'll show you maybe a picture or two here on the screen. But there's actually lots of animals running around. It's called a savannah view with like some giraffes and zebras and all kinds of animals running around back there. So it's a pretty cool spot. If you've ever contemplated coming, I'd certainly highly recommend you consider this resort for a nice relaxing vacation. But of course, if you're going to the parks here at Disney, there's not much relaxing about that, but it can be a lot of fun as well. Into today's news, we have a waiver claim once again. The Winnipeg Jets have claimed Carson Kuhlman, forward from the Seattle Kraken. Of course, we saw the Kraken claim Eeli Tolvanen from the Nashville Predators yesterday, so they had to create a roster spot, so he goes on waivers and now gets picked up by the Winnipeg Jets. Of course, Kuhlman started his career with the Boston Bruins, ended up in Seattle by the end of last season, started this year there. Now it goes over to the Winnipeg Jets. He's appeared this year in 14 games and only put up 3 points. So when he does get into the lineup, he's typically playing a bottom six role. So we'll see what kind of impact he can have here for Winnipeg. On to some injury updates here. We have a number of them regarding the Vegas Golden Knights. Jack Eichel's officially on injured reserve. He's now in a day-to-day type of status. Shea is also on injured reserve with a week-to-week status. And they've upgraded Zach Whitecloud now to long-term injury reserve. So certainly 3 big pieces out there for the Golden Knights. Of course, Alex Pietrangelo, I believe, is still away from the team as well on a personal leave. So certainly lots of big names out there for Vegas as they have had a strong start to the year, but it's going to be tough to be playing without all those guys here in their lineup. A couple updates out of Montreal as well. We found out that Sean Monahan and David Savard are both going to be out for about 2 to 3 weeks. We knew both players were injured, which we've discussed recently. Just waiting for a little bit more clarity on the timeline. So 2 to 3 weeks, we'll put them out until probably early in the new year. They also mentioned that Jonathan Drouin, still obviously on the injured reserve as well, is now basically considered a day-to-day. He's going to travel with the team, and I believe there's a chance he could play the next game against Ottawa tomorrow, but more than likely the next game or two after that. It seems more logical from what they were saying. Cole Caulfield also left last night's game as well after taking a really big hit. Obviously some concerns, I'm sure, about concussion. Again, another type of situation where he's going to travel with the team, so he must be doing relatively well. But sounds like it's not 100% given he plays tomorrow. But they said it is possible that he could be in the lineup, and we'll have to see for sure once he has a little bit more time here. But all indications are that he may not miss any time, even though he took a really big hit and left the game, and there was a lot of concern, I know, in the Habs organization are on the bench for a young Caulfield. Devils goalie Mackenzie Blackwood is nearing a return. He's now been sent to the American Hockey League for a conditioning stint, so he can go down there and play a couple of games, see how everything's going, make sure he's good to go before he comes back onto the NHL roster. So hopefully that's good news for them. The other Devils goalies have been holding down the fort and playing well, so be interesting to see how him returning and being healthy might impact things, and see if it has any kind of possible negative impact at all. If he can jump right in and just continue on with the same flow, which is some sort of sure what they're hoping for here. The Red Wings have placed defenseman Robert Hagg on injury reserve and have recalled Steven Kampfer, so he gets a chance to come up and play. And the Ottawa Senators, even though he's not officially on IR yet, did have another big blow last night. They did pick up a 3-0 shutout victory over the Anaheim Ducks, which was great. On the night they honored Wade Redden to the Ring of Honor. But unfortunately, it came at a price in the first period when Tim Stützle went down with could be a significant injury. We're still waiting on clarity from the team. DJ Smith didn't have much of an update last night or this morning, saying that he needs to undergo further testing before they can really give any kind of a clear update. But looking at it, it's some sort of arm or shoulder injury. I know there was comments from Shane Pinto mentioning shoulder, but of course, that doesn't necessarily 100% mean it is a shoulder. It could be an elbow, but he was spotted after the game with his arm in a sling. So at the very least, he is going to miss some time. They're just hopeful at this point that it may not be too significant, but it didn't look good, and we'll have to wait and see a little bit more further clarification on that here, probably over the next day or so. Now, some updates from the NHL Board of Governor meetings. Gary Bettman was asked about salary cap and if it could be rising as much as $3 or $4 million this coming offseason, which is what some speculation had arisen earlier. But of course, right now he says that right now the projections are still showing the escrow that has to be paid back by the players to be a little bit short, and that it's hard to guarantee anything more than the $1 million increase that was previously agreed upon. It sounds like it's around $70 million is what the gap is. Now, some reporters have kind of taken the math here and kind of said if the NHL can have a real solid revenue generation during the playoffs, especially some bigger markets, can have some deeper runs, looking at your bigger markets like Toronto, New York, Boston, those guys who have the bigger populations, bigger fan bases, obviously they might be able to help close that gap and maybe get it to the point where that $70 million gap can be closed. But ultimately, at this point, there's some talk that maybe they could take the projected increases that are 2 or 3 years ahead and spread it out over a longer period of time to give teams a little bit more cap relief in this coming off season. And Gary Bettman said that that's not something that's been discussed with the NHLPA here as of yet. So obviously, hard to say how that's going to go down, but far from a given that we get any more than $1 million increase this coming offseason. That's going to be a big blow for some teams that are in real tight cap trouble, which is actually quite a bit of the league. It would certainly make trading a lot easier as well, which is something a lot of NHL GMs and a lot of fans would love to see happen more frequently. Now, yesterday we talked about the fact that there's reports from Ian Mendez of The Athletic, who covers the Senators, saying that there was some belief that there could be a settlement nearing between Eugene Melnick, obviously his estate, and his company, Capital Sports Management, and John Ruddy, their previous partners working on the LeBreton project to get a new arena downtown for the Ottawa Senators a number of years ago. That ended up in a big dispute, big lawsuits against each other, and that's something that needs to be resolved before the ownership situation ideally changes here, because we know the team's for sale and they're getting closer to having a new owner be in place probably within the next 1 to 2 months. But now CTV is reporting today that they're reporting that they have sources saying that the settlement has been reached and that court trial of January 3rd will be avoided. So that's really good news for the Senators. So Capital Sports Management and Trinity Development Group, reportedly, according to CTV, have come to a settlement agreement. So that's excellent news. It will be one less thing for the new ownership group with the Senators to worry about. They can move forward here, just working on the new downtown arena and everything else that's going to be involved here, getting this team moving forward. Now, as I mentioned on the trade section of the video today, I want to start with Bo Horvat. He's been a hot topic of conversation over the last number of weeks. Obviously, the pending UFA Canuck captain, having a real hot start to the season, one of the league's top scorers, has been heavily discussed in the rumor mill. There's been lots of updates, day after day or week after week here. But Horvat himself decided to put out a statement today, which seems to me, to be honest, in my opinion, it just felt like it was a little bit weird. Every once in a while, you get a player, especially a higher profile guy, really in a Canadian or big market, that's getting a lot of speculation around them. Sometimes we'll make comments to reporters just saying that they want to be private about it, they want to discuss it, publicly, things like that. But Horvat actually released a statement through the team. I'll show you here on the screen. His statement says basically that he is focused on the season and playing for the Vancouver Canucks, helping the team in any way I can. I will not have any further comments this year about my future. So at the end of the day, he was also talking to media today about face-to-face and said, kind of reiterated the same thing, that he just wanted it to be a private matter, that he wasn't going to be discussing contract extensions. He also went on to say that he felt the need to apologize to his teammates for being a distraction. which goes to show you what kind of person he is. Certainly, he does not want that to be the case. He doesn't want this to impact his teammates. He doesn't want this negotiation or this potential trade that's coming to impact his friends and teammates and the rest of the team here. Ultimately, it's hard to say if it is or it isn't, but it's just a little, I guess, unique or odd that we don't really see players putting statements out like this here very often. But it's been reported on again today, talking between Rick Dhaliwal, Elliotte Friedman, and other Vancouver media, that the contract offer that the Canucks gave to Horvat most recently was under $8 million, in their low sevens is what's being reported. That's quite a bit below even what they're paying JT Miller. And based on Horvat's production this year, there's just no way he's going to accept that, which apparently they say that the team did not get a positive response from Horvat and his agent, that they rejected that offer, and that essentially seals his fate as likely being done with the Canucks and will ultimately lead to a trade in the coming weeks and months. Now, we also had heard reports a little while back that Vancouver was open to the possibility of not waiting to the deadline and maybe doing it a little bit sooner, trying to jump ahead of some other teams here, maybe getting a good return to kind of set the market for other players in similar situations. So obviously, we'll have to follow the story. We know it's something that's going to be heavily discussed here, but ultimately for right now, Horvat sounds like he's done in Vancouver. And I said the fact that he felt the need to put out a statement and apologize to his teammates goes to show you what kind of good captain, a good character this guy has. But at the end of the day, it's not going to change the narrative here. It just sounds like a trade is pretty much a given, just a matter of when and where it's going to happen. Same goes for Brock Boeser. There's really no further updates there. The team continues to try to find a deal for him, and we'll see when we have further updates. For right now, there's really nothing new development on that front. Friedman and Rick Dhaliwal both just said that essentially that they're feeling things out, having exploratory trade conversations with both players, and it's a little early to say where things are going to go. Now, could the Anaheim Ducks be interested in Jesse Puljujarvi? We know he's a player in Edmonton who's been also heavily discussed not only here on the channel but in a variety of other news outlets as well. We got more information today to confirm that GM of the Ducks, Pat Verbeek, has not only at the last Oilers game, but he's there again tonight. So the Ducks are one of the few teams who have cap flexibility, who could take on the Puljujarvi contract. It also has a spot really on the roster where they could put him in there and see if he can mesh with their young group of players. The Ducks are one of the league's worst teams, certainly not scoring a lot of goals. They're not defending very well at all. They are an absolute train wreck, and I have no doubt will be one of the top couple teams when it comes to the draft lottery and potentially getting the first overall selection. But ultimately, Jesse Puljujarvi could go there for the rest of the year to see if there's a fit. They said they're one of the few teams who wouldn't necessarily need Edmonton to retain salary, which we know Ken Holland would not be crazy about doing, and we'll see. But the fact that Pat Verbeek is kind of following them around makes you wonder if there is more truth to that, and that the Ducks might be a logical landing spot for Puljujarvi here in the near future once the Oilers can finally pull the trigger here on a deal. And lastly, could the Bruins be the ones to land Hawks captain Jonathan Toews? We know Toews and Kane are both likely going to be having some very important conversations between their agent, they both represented by Pat Brisson, as well as the Blackhawks GM Kyle Davidson, of course their families as well, about their futures in Chicago. There's still not a lot of clarity on what the plans are going to be here, but there's a lot of people that feel that if there's a market and an opportunity, that they'll both end up ultimately being traded. Many feel that Toews is more likely to not want to be part of a rebuild, that there is still a possibility Kane may choose to want to be a lifelong Hawk and break a bunch of Hawks records, and that might be more important to him than possibly getting traded and chasing another Stanley Cup. But at the same time, when his contract's up, as much as he's a good player, does the Blackhawks want to bring him back if he wants to stay? We don't know the answer to that right now. But Dave Pagnotta of the fourthperiod.com is reporting that even though the Blackhawks have denied it publicly, that there have indeed been some teams that have reached out to talk about Jonathan Toews, specifically the Boston Bruins and the Colorado Avalanche. Now, of course, doesn't mean that he's going to end up going to either team here, but it shows you that both teams have interest, and it makes sense as to why. Certainly the Boston Bruins had a phenomenal start to the year, and it wouldn't be any shock at all to see them want to add at the deadline. Of course, Toews is a top six centerman with a great resume. Could certainly add more depth to both of those clubs heading into the NHL playoffs. I mean, Toews and Kane are still playing at a pretty good level. Obviously, Chicago would have to retain 50% of the salary, and it's a possibility based on the acquiring team, they might need a third party to maybe retain some more salary. It might be a case where there's 3 teams involved here to knock that salary down even further, and the Bruins, Habs, or whoever else it might be here might have to pay an extra draft pick or something else, extra asset, to have a team retain some money, kind of rent out some of their cap space for the rest of the season. So we'll see where it goes, but the Boston Bruins, to me, are not a surprise. I fully expect them to be adding up the deadline. Toews is a prime kind of player. I think it would fit well with them. Certainly, if you take a look at their centerman, I know right now I believe David Krejci is battling with an injury, but between Krejci and Bergeron, you could easily put Jonathan Toews in the number 3 center spot, maybe move some other players around. I think he'd be a great fit there. Now, it might seem a little weird for some to see a longtime Blackhawk like that in a Bruins uniform in the playoffs, but it could make sense and could come to be. So certainly interesting to hear from Pagnotta that they've definitely kicked tires at least and had some early exploratory conversations. Now, what's the price tag going to be? It's really hard to say. I think it's Kane and Toews, both scenarios. Should they both decide that they want to be moved, I don't think the Blackhawks are going to be getting a major return because they both have a full no-move clause. You can basically call their own shots here, seal their own fate, and tell them which team they want to go to. And it's going to kind of take the leverage out of the team's hand so that they can probably go where they want. But in return, Chicago may not get a lot. But at least if they get something, it's better than letting them walk as free agents in the offseason. So let me know your thoughts on the possibility of Jonathan Toews going to the Boston Bruins. Where do you think Bo Horvat ends up here eventually? Could the salary cap end up staying, just $1 million more next year? That would certainly be some unwelcome information by many NHL teams. But let me know your thoughts on all of today's news down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.